Sarah is just a little girl caught in the chaos of her parents' bitter divorce, often left to walk to school alone and return to an empty house. Every day, her quiet neighbor Clyde watches her from his window, always there, always watching. One afternoon, Clyde pulls up beside Sarah, offering her a ride home. Her heart races with fear, but unable to refuse, she climbs into his car. The ride is filled with uncomfortable silence, until Clyde starts talking about things he shouldn't know, like her parents' divorce. Sarah's unease grows. Why does Clyde seem so interested in her? What does he really want? And why does she feel trapped in his gaze every morning as she walks to school? But is Clyde what he seems on the outside? In this gripping and suspenseful tale, trust is a dangerous game, and Sarah must navigate a delicate line between fear and truth. Before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where you're watching from today, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy the story. Now let's get started. Sarah Thompson stood at the edge of her front yard, her little backpack bouncing against her back as she peered down the street. The early morning sun cast a golden hue over the neighborhood, illuminating the familiar faces of the trees that lined the sidewalk. At 9 years old, Sarah had learned to find beauty in the simple things: a shimmering dewdrop, the laughter of children at play, and the way the wind would whisper secrets through the leaves. But beneath her innocent exterior, a storm brewed within her heart. The past few months had turned her world upside down. Her parents' voices, once filled with laughter and love, were now laced with tension and uncertainty. The word divorce echoed in her mind, a heavy weight she didn't fully understand. Why did adults always have to complicate everything? They had told her it was nothing she did. It was just something that happened between grown-ups. But for Sarah, it felt like a thunderstorm had rolled in, shattering the calm of her childhood. "Sarah, time to go," her mother called from inside the house, snapping her back to reality. The urgency in her voice mirrored the chaos that had taken over their lives. With a final glance at the street, she set off down the familiar path to school, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As she walked, she couldn't help but notice her neighbor, Mr. Clyde, watching her from his window. He was a single man, often seen in the early mornings, his silhouette framed by the glass. Sarah felt a strange mix of curiosity and discomfort. He had always been kind enough, offering a smile or a wave when their paths crossed, but today something felt different. She quickened her pace, hoping to shake off the lingering unease. Each step toward school was filled with thoughts of her parents. They had promised her things would get better, that they would find a way to be happy again. But as she walked alone, the silence of the world around her felt heavy, a constant reminder of her solitude. She wished for her old life back, the one filled with family dinners and bedtime stories, not the hushed conversations and late-night arguments that had replaced them. Arriving at school, Sarah joined the bustling crowd of children, her worries temporarily washed away by the laughter and excitement that filled the air. But even amidst the chaos, the thought of Mr. Clyde lingered in her mind. What was it about him that made her so uneasy? She couldn't quite place it, but there was something in his gaze that made her feel vulnerable. Little did she know, this simple morning walk would set into motion a series of events that would change her life forever. The days rolled by, each one blending into the next, as Sarah adjusted to her new routine. She walked to school alone, her little legs carrying her past familiar houses, trees, and the whispers of the wind. Each morning she would see Mr. Clyde watching her from his window, a figure shrouded in mystery. She wondered what he was thinking, what stories lay hidden behind those curious eyes. One crisp afternoon, the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Sarah's heart raced with excitement as she gathered her things and joined her friends in the schoolyard, the laughter and chatter echoing around her. But as she stepped outside, she felt the familiar weight of loneliness settle on her shoulders. Her friends had their parents waiting for them, but Sarah was headed home alone. As she began her walk, she caught sight of Clyde's car parked at the curb, her stomach twisted with apprehension. Why was he out there? She had seen him in his yard before, but this was different. It was as if he was waiting for her. "Hey, Sarah," Clyde called out, his voice warm and inviting. She hesitated, her feet rooted to the ground. "Would you like a ride home?" Sarah felt a flutter of fear in her chest. She remembered her mother's warnings about talking to strangers, but there was something in Clyde's eyes, something that felt safe. Still, she hesitated, a polite smile gracing her lips. "No, thank you. I can walk." Clyde chuckled softly, his demeanor disarming. "Come on, it's a beautiful day. It'll be quicker, and I promise I won't bite." His laughter was genuine, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. She felt a mix of discomfort and politeness tugging at her. After all, he seemed harmless. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she climbed into the car. The interior was neat and tidy, with an air freshener hanging from the mirror that smelled faintly of vanilla. As they pulled away from the school, an awkward silence enveloped them, broken only by the gentle hum of the engine. Sarah stared out the window, trying to quell the rising anxiety in her stomach. "So, how's school?" Clyde asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. His smile was friendly, but something in his tone felt heavy, as if he was searching for more than just small talk. "It's okay," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I like recess." Clyde nodded, but the silence returned, thicker this time. As they drove through the neighborhood, the familiar streets began to blur, and Sarah felt a knot tightening in her throat. The route felt unfamiliar, her heart racing with unease. Suddenly, Clyde broke the silence. "You know, I've heard about your parents' divorce. That must be tough for you." Sarah froze, her heart pounding. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I just hear things, sweetie. I used to have a daughter, Clara. Her mother and I, well, we didn't see eye to eye either. Sometimes it can be hard, can't it?" His voice held a softness that made her feel vulnerable. "Can you please let me out of the car now?" she blurted out, panic rising in her chest. "Why, honey? We're almost home," Clyde replied, his tone shifting, and a chill ran down Sarah's spine. She felt trapped, her mind racing with the possibilities of what could happen. She remembered her mother's warnings. Never trust strangers, never get in the car with someone you don't know. "Please," she insisted, her voice trembling as fear washed over her. To her surprise, Clyde pulled over, the tires crunching on the gravel of a side road. He turned to her with a concerned expression. Okay, just a minute, kiddo." He reached for the door handle, but Sarah didn't move. As they sat there, the silence grew heavy again, the tension palpable. Clyde shifted in his seat, then pulled out a chocolate bar from the glove compartment. "Here, I know it can be tough. Want one?" Sarah's heart raced as she shook her head vigorously. "No, thank you." After what felt like an eternity, Clyde's expression softened and he said, "You remind me so much of Clara. She loved chocolate too." "Is she?" Sarah began, but Clyde cut her off. "She's not here anymore," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "But that's a story for another time. For now, go home and let your parents know you're safe." With a mixture of relief and confusion, Sarah nodded, the knot in her stomach easing slightly as he parked in front of her house. She climbed out of the car, feeling a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. As she stepped onto the familiar ground of her yard, she looked back at Clyde, who smiled at her sadly. "Take care, sweetie," he called out as she walked away. "And remember, if you ever need anything, just come by." Sarah waved hesitantly, her heart still racing. As she reached her front door, she glanced back at Clyde, who was watching her with a mix of longing and sorrow. For a brief moment she felt a connection, a bond forged in shared pain and loss. But deep down she knew that something about their encounter had shifted within her. She had to be careful. The days turned into weeks, and Sarah found herself thinking about Mr. Clyde more often than she expected. Their brief encounter had ignited a sense of curiosity within her. Despite her initial fear, she felt a strange connection to the man who had once seemed so intimidating. Maybe it was the shared pain of loss or the bond formed from understanding. She wasn't quite sure. Each morning, Sarah would walk to school, her heart heavy with thoughts of her parents. The divorce had cast a shadow over her once bright world. She missed the little things, the way her father would tickle her until she squealed, the bedtime stories her mother read with animated voices, and the Sunday family dinners filled with laughter. Now, those moments felt like fragments of a dream, slipping further away with each passing day. After school one day, as Sarah headed home, she hesitated in front of Clyde's house. She had been thinking about visiting him, but doubt crept in. Would he really want to see her again? Taking a deep breath, she approached his front door and knocked, her heart racing. A moment later, Clyde answered, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "Well, if it isn't my favorite visitor." He opened the door wider, welcoming her inside. Sarah stepped over the threshold, the smell of freshly baked cookies wafting through the air. "Hi, Mr. Clyde. I was just wondering if I could see Clara's toys?" "Of course. I'd love to show you," he said, leading her into a cozy living room filled with memories. Framed photographs of a smiling girl surrounded by colorful toys adorned the walls. Clara's laughter seemed to echo in the space, and Sarah felt a strange comfort. As they rummaged through Clara's old things, Sarah was captivated by the assortment of dolls, stuffed animals, and art supplies. Each item held a story, a piece of Clara's life that Clyde was willing to share with her. "This was Clara's favorite doll," he said, holding up a well-loved rag doll with a missing button eye. "She named her Lucy." "Lucy is cute," Sarah exclaimed, reaching out to touch the doll's frayed dress. "Clara used to take Lucy everywhere," Clyde chuckled. "She even tried to sneak her into school once, but her teacher caught her." They both laughed, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Clyde's stories painted a picture of a life filled with love, even amidst sorrow. "Do you play any instruments, Sarah?" Clyde asked, shifting the conversation. "I used to play the recorder in music class, but it was hard," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I have a piano. Would you like to try it?" Clyde asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Her heart raced at the idea. "Can I?" "Absolutely. Come on." He led her to a small room where a beautiful, upright piano sat. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the window as Clyde lifted the lid, revealing the polished keys. As she sat on the bench, Sarah's fingers hesitated above the keys, a mixture of fear and exhilaration washing over her. "I don't know how to play," she said, biting her lip. Clyde smiled encouragingly. "That's okay, I'll teach you. Just let your fingers find the keys." With his guidance, Sarah pressed down on the keys, producing a hesitant but beautiful sound. They spent the afternoon playing simple melodies, laughter mingling with music. With every note, Sarah felt the burdens of her home life lift, replaced by a sense of belonging she had longed for. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became a regular visitor at Clyde's house. They formed a routine, sharing stories and laughter as Clyde taught her to play more complex pieces on the piano. He would often share anecdotes about Clara, highlighting her love for music and her adventurous spirit. Sarah soaked it all in, feeling as if she were becoming part of a family she had never known. One afternoon, as they sat side by side at the piano, Clyde said, "You know, Clara loved to play this song on her birthday. It always made her smile." "What song?" Sarah asked, intrigued. "Here Comes the Sun." It was her favorite. "Would you like to learn it?" "Yes, please," Sarah exclaimed, her heart swelling with anticipation. As they began to play, Clyde's gentle guidance helped her navigate the notes, but Sarah's heart was elsewhere. The melody carried a bittersweet feeling, a reminder of the joy Clara once felt, interwoven with the sorrow of her absence. With each note, Sarah felt the weight of loss and love blend together, creating a tapestry of emotions she couldn't quite articulate. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened. Clyde became a steady presence in Sarah's life, a father figure who provided the support and understanding she desperately needed. They shared secrets and dreams, their laughter echoing through the house, filling it with warmth. But as their friendship grew, Clyde's past loomed over them like a shadow. Sarah was too young to grasp the full extent of Clara's story, yet she felt a lingering sadness in Clyde's eyes whenever he spoke of her. It was a silent reminder of the fragility of life and the impact of loss. One evening, as they sat in the living room surrounded by Clara's toys, Sarah noticed Clyde staring out the window, lost in thought. "Mr. Clyde? Are you okay?" she asked, her small voice breaking the silence. He turned to her, a smile masking the pain beneath. "Just thinking about my girl," he replied, his voice soft. "It's hard sometimes, but I find comfort in sharing her memory with you." "I like hearing about Clara," Sarah said, her heart aching for him. "She sounds really special." "She was," Clyde whispered, a tear glistening in his eye, "and you remind me of her." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest, realizing that in a world filled with uncertainty, they had found solace in one another. a friendship that blossomed amidst the backdrop of loss and healing. As the weeks rolled on, the bond between Sarah and Clyde deepened, their friendship woven together by shared experiences and the silent understanding of loss. Clyde continued to teach Sarah the piano, his gentle guidance fostering her love for music. Each lesson became a cherished ritual, an escape from the turmoil of her home life. But as much as Sarah enjoyed her time with Clyde, she could sense an undercurrent of sorrow that clung to him, a shadow that lingered even in their moments of laughter. She often wondered about Clara, what kind of girl she had been, and what had happened to her. Clyde spoke of her fondly, but there were moments when his voice would tremble and his smile would falter. It made Sarah curious. One sunny afternoon, as they sat side by side at the piano, Sarah decided to ask, "Mr. Clyde, can you tell me more about Clara? What was she like?" Clyde paused, his fingers resting on the keys. For a moment, a flicker of pain crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with a warm smile. Clara was a bright star, full of life and laughter. She loved music, just like you, and she was always the first to try new things. She had a big heart and made friends easily. "What kind of things did she like?" Sarah asked, leaning in, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "She loved animals, especially dogs," Clyde said, his expression softening. "We had a golden retriever named Max. Clara would spend hours playing with him in the backyard, laughing and running around." Sarah smiled at the thought of a joyful Clara playing with a puppy. "What else?" Clyde hesitated for a moment, his gaze drifting to a photo of Clara on the wall. She was smiling, her arms wrapped around Max, her hair blowing in the wind. "She was a great artist too. She loved to draw and paint. We would spend weekends making art together. It was her way of expressing herself." "Did she have a lot of friends?" Sarah inquired, feeling a sense of protectiveness toward the girl she had never met. Clyde's smile faded slightly. "She had friends, but sometimes kids can be unkind. Clara faced some challenges at school. There were kids who didn't understand her, who made her feel different." "Why would they do that?" Sarah asked, her heart aching for the girl who had faced such pain. Clyde sighed, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Sometimes people can be cruel without realizing the impact of their words. Clara faced bullying because of her mixed background. It affected her more than I realized." "What happened to her?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with concern. Clyde looked down, his hands trembling as he recalled the memories. "She couldn't take it anymore, sweetie. The pain and hurt became too much for her to bear." His voice cracked, and Sarah could see the tears welling in his eyes. "I wish I could have done more to help her." The weight of his words settled over them like a heavy blanket, the silence thick with emotion. Sarah felt her heart ache for Clyde and for Clara, a girl who had faced struggles she couldn't understand. "Mr. Clyde, I'm so sorry," she said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. Clyde looked at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. It means a lot to me that you care." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the piano lingering in the air and blending with the sorrow of their conversation. In that moment, Sarah felt a new responsibility to honor Clara's memory, to carry forward the kindness and love she had for life. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow in the room, Clyde took a deep breath and wiped his eyes. "Clara would have loved to meet you, you know. She would have adored your spirit. Can I do something for her?" Sarah asked, a determined look on her face. "Like a memory project or something? I want to make sure she's never forgotten." Clyde's face lit up at her suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetie. We could create a scrapbook collecting all the memories and stories about Clara. It could be a beautiful tribute to her life." "Yes, let's do it," Sarah exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. The thought of creating something meaningful filled her with purpose, and Clyde's smile reassured her that this was the right path. As they began to brainstorm ideas, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. She realized that while Clara's life had ended too soon, her legacy could live on through the love and kindness they shared. The following week, they set to work on the scrapbook, gathering photographs, drawings, and stories from Clyde's memories. Each piece they added felt like a step toward healing, an opportunity to celebrate the girl who had touched Clyde's heart and now theirs. Sarah found herself drawn to the colors and images they selected, each one telling a part of Clara's story. They spent afternoons laughing, reminiscing, and creating, filling the pages with love and memories. Clyde would often tell Sarah stories of Clara's adventures, her dreams, and the way she brought joy to everyone around her. With each tale, Sarah felt a deeper connection to both Clyde and Clara, realizing that love transcends even the most profound losses. As the scrapbook began to take shape, they decided to include a special page dedicated to Clara's passions, her love for music, art, and the friendships she had built. They decorated the page with colorful drawings and notes, a vibrant celebration of Clara's spirit. One evening, as they sat together, Clyde turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "You know, Sarah, I want you to remember that Clara's story doesn't end with her passing. It's about how we carry her memory forward, how we choose to honor her in our lives." "I promise I will," Sarah said earnestly, her heart swelling with purpose. "I'll make sure Clara is never forgotten." Together, they continued to create the scrapbook, transforming their shared sorrow into a powerful tribute to a girl whose light still shone through the love of those she left behind. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah's friendship with Clyde blossomed. Their time together was filled with music, laughter, and the healing power of shared memories. The scrapbook they had created became a cherished project, a testament to Clara's vibrant spirit that continued to inspire both of them. Then came a significant day, the day Sarah had been waiting for. Her birthday was approaching, and with it, the promise of celebration. While her parents were preoccupied with their divorce, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Would they remember? Would they even be around to celebrate? In the days leading up to her birthday, Sarah found herself visiting Clyde more often, sharing her hopes and dreams. "I just want to have a fun day, even if it's just the two of us," she confided to him one afternoon while they were working on the scrapbook. Clyde smiled warmly, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "You know, I have a little surprise planned for you. Just wait and see." Sarah's heart fluttered with anticipation. "Really? What is it?" "Now, that would ruin the surprise. You'll just have to wait until your birthday," Clyde teased, his smile infectious. The night before her birthday, Sarah lay in bed, unable to sleep. Her mind buzzed with excitement, but there was also a heaviness in her heart. Would it be a lonely day? Would she be left to celebrate on her own? Her parents were so caught up in their own problems that she couldn't help but feel forgotten. Morning finally arrived, and as sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, Sarah jumped out of bed, her heart racing. She hurried through her morning routine, the excitement bubbling over. But as she glanced at the clock, she noticed the time creeping closer to when she needed to leave for school. Her parents had left for work without a word about her birthday, and a small pang of disappointment settled in her chest. She forced herself to shake it off. She had Clyde and her plans with him to look forward to. At school, Sarah tried her best to focus on her classes, but her mind wandered to thoughts of Clyde and what the day would hold. As lunchtime approached, her friends gathered around her, whispering and giggling. "Happy birthday, Sarah!" one of her classmates exclaimed, surprising her. "Oh, thank you," Sarah said, her heart swelling with joy. They sang her happy birthday, and although it was brief, it felt like a small celebration amidst the chaos of her life. The laughter and smiles lifted her spirits, making her feel special for a moment. After school, Sarah raced home, excitement coursing through her veins. She quickly dropped off her backpack and headed straight for Clyde's house. When she knocked on the door, it swung open, revealing Clyde standing there with a broad smile and a colorful cake in his hands. "Happy birthday, Sarah!" he exclaimed, and she gasped in delight. "You made me a cake?" she asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "Of course, it's your special day after all," Clyde replied, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, the living room was filled with decorations, balloons, streamers, and a small table set with party hats. "Clyde, this is amazing!" Sarah squealed, feeling a wave of happiness wash over her. "I wanted to make this day special for you," he said, beaming. "You mean a lot to me, Sarah." They spent the evening celebrating, laughter echoing off the walls as they shared stories, played piano, and indulged in cake. Clyde even brought out the Polaroid camera he had used before, snapping candid pictures of Sarah as she blew out the candles on her cake, her face illuminated with joy. "Let's take a picture together," Sarah suggested, her heart racing with excitement. Clyde agreed, and as they posed together, she felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging that she had longed for. "Say Clara," Clyde called, and they both laughed as he clicked the shutter, capturing the moment. Afterward, Clyde handed her the photograph. "This is for you, a little memento of our special day together," he said, his voice gentle. Sarah stared at the picture, the joy captured in their smiles making her heart swell. "Thank you, Clyde. I'll treasure it forever." As the evening drew to a close, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. Clyde had made her birthday one to remember, filling her day with love and joy that she had thought was lost. "Can we do this again next year?" Sarah asked, her eyes shining. Clyde chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "You bet. I'll make sure it's even more special." After their celebration, Sarah made her way home, clutching the photograph tightly, her heart light. She entered the house, feeling the familiar weight of silence around her. With a sigh, she placed her backpack on the kitchen table, her mind still swirling with happy memories from the day. But fatigue was setting in, and she decided to head straight to bed, leaving her backpack downstairs. Hours later, Sarah's father came home, tired and preoccupied. As he walked through the dimly lit house, he noticed Sarah's backpack on the table. A sense of confusion washed over him. He had expected to find her asleep in her room. Curious, he approached the backpack and noticed a piece of paper sticking out of the front pocket. He pulled it out, and his heart sank as he realized it was a photograph of Sarah and Clyde, arms around each other, grinning broadly at the camera. The joyful smiles on their faces felt like a punch to the gut. Questions raced through his mind as anger surged within him. Who was this man? What was he doing with his daughter? Without a second thought, he stormed out of the house, determined to confront Clyde and get answers. The cool night air felt electric as Sarah's father stormed across the lawn to Clyde's house, each step fueled by anger and confusion. The world around him blurred, focused solely on the image of his daughter smiling with this strange man. His heart raced, pounding in his chest as he neared the door. What was Clyde doing with Sarah? Why was he taking pictures? With fury, he pounded on the door, the sound echoing in the quiet of the neighborhood. "Clyde, open up!" he yelled, his voice raw and demanding. The weight of his fatherly instincts propelled him forward, unwilling to back down. Moments later, the door creaked open to reveal Clyde, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he took in the rage on Sarah's father's face. "What's wrong?" Clyde asked, stepping back slightly, as if sensing the storm brewing. "What are you doing with my daughter?" Sarah's father spat, the accusation heavy in the air. "I saw the picture. What kind of relationship do you have with her?" His fists clenched at his sides, the heat of his anger radiating off him like a furnace. Clyde's expression turned serious, but he remained composed, determined to diffuse the tension. "We're friends. I'm teaching her piano," he explained, his tone steady, though the storm brewing in his eyes betrayed his worry. "Friends? Is that what you call it?" Sarah's father's voice dripped with disdain. "You're just some creep who takes pictures with little girls. What kind of man are you?" The words flew out, sharp and accusatory, echoing in the still night air. Clyde took a deep breath, fighting against the rising tide of anger within him. "I promise you, I would never do anything to hurt Sarah. She's like family to me. I lost my daughter, and I'm just trying to help her," he replied, his voice laced with sincerity, desperation edging in. "Help her? By taking her away from her home? By taking pictures with her? You think that's helping?" Sarah's father sneered, stepping closer, his anger blinding him to Clyde's pleas. The tension between them grew thicker, a palpable force that threatened to explode. "Please, just let me explain," Clyde urged, his eyes pleading. "I'm not a threat. I'm trying to give her what I couldn't give Clara. I've lost so much. I just want to share that love with someone who needs it." But Sarah's father wasn't listening. The adrenaline surged within him, urging him to take action. In a moment of rage, he threw a punch, connecting with Clyde's jaw. The force of it surprised both men, and Clyde stumbled back, shock and pain flashing across his face. "Don't you ever come near my daughter again!" Sarah's father yelled, his voice filled with a mix of rage and fear. He turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving Clyde in stunned silence. As he walked away, Sarah's father felt a surge of righteousness. He thought he had protected his daughter, but deep inside, guilt began to gnaw at him. Clyde fell to the ground, stunned by the blow. The world around him swirled in a heath. Clyde's eyes fluttered open to the harsh brightness of a hospital room, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling the air. He blinked against the glare, trying to comprehend his surroundings. As he attempted to sit up, a sharp ache shot through his jaw, causing him to wince in pain. "Easy there," a nurse said, rushing to his side, concern etched on her face. "You took quite a hit. The doctor will be in shortly." Clyde's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had happened. He remembered the confrontation with Sarah's father, the punch, and then everything faded to black. Panic gripped him. Had he failed Sarah? The thought made his chest tighten. As he lay there, the door opened, and a couple of police officers stepped inside, their expressions serious. "Mr. Clyde," one of them said, glancing at the nurse before turning his attention back to him, "we need to ask you some questions about the incident that occurred tonight." "I didn't do anything wrong," Clyde replied weakly, his voice hoarse, laced with fatigue and pain. "We're not here to accuse you," the officer assured him, his tone calm but firm. "But Sarah's father is pressing charges, and we need to hear your side of the story." Clyde's heart sank at the mention of charges. He didn't want this to escalate any further. "I was just trying to help her. I lost my daughter, and I didn't want Sarah to feel alone," he explained, his voice breaking as he struggled to maintain his composure. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions softening slightly as they listened to Clyde's earnestness. They took notes, asking questions about his relationship with Sarah and what had led to the confrontation. Clyde recounted how he had met Sarah, how their friendship had blossomed through shared moments at the piano, and how he saw her as a chance to honor Clara's memory. As they finished their questioning, Clyde felt a mix of relief and despair. He had hoped to share the truth, but the situation had spiraled out of control. How would he explain it to Sarah? Would she understand? Would she be scared of him now? After the officers left, Clyde sank back against the pillow, allowing the tears he had held back to fall freely. He missed Clara desperately, and now it felt like he was losing another connection that had helped him heal. He thought of Sarah's laughter, her excitement at playing the piano, and the bond they had built. As the hours dragged on, the doctor finally entered, examining Clyde's injuries with careful precision. "You'll be sore for a while, but you'll recover," the doctor said. "Just take it easy and don't push yourself too hard." Clyde nodded, his mind still racing with thoughts of Sarah and her father's explosive reaction. He felt a deep sense of injustice swelling within him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had simply wanted to help, a desire rooted in his own loss. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the hospital room, Sarah arrived. Clyde could see the apprehension on her face as she stepped through the door, her eyes filled with tears. "Clyde, I'm so sorry," she cried, rushing to his side. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Clyde wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight as he tried to reassure her. "It's not your fault, sweetie," he murmured, his voice gentle. "You didn't do anything wrong. Your dad was just scared." "But he hurt you," Sarah said, her voice breaking as she pulled back to look at him. "It's okay," Clyde replied, forcing a smile despite the pain shooting through him. "I'm a tough old man. I can handle it." They shared a moment of silence, both feeling the weight of the situation hanging in the air. Sarah's heart ached for Clyde, and she felt a mix of guilt and sadness for the pain he had endured. As they hugged, Clyde whispered, "You keep playing that piano, you hear? That's what matters most." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. "I will, I promise." Clyde smiled softly, but inside he knew things would never be the same again. The bond they had formed was precious, but now it was overshadowed by fear and misunderstanding. Clyde remained in the hospital, the rhythmic beeping of the machines serving as a reminder of the reality he found himself in. Each passing hour felt heavy with uncertainty as he awaited news about his injuries, about Sarah, about everything that had spiraled out of control. The room was quiet except for the occasional footsteps in the hallway and the faint sounds of nurses attending to other patients. Clyde spent his time reflecting on the bond he had built with Sarah and how quickly it had been jeopardized. His heart ached with the thought of her feeling scared or confused about their friendship. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, the door swung open again, this time revealing two police officers. Their demeanor was serious, and Clyde's heart sank, wondering what news they might bring. "Mr. Clyde," one officer began, looking at him with a mix of professionalism and sympathy. "We've reviewed the circumstances surrounding the incident with Sarah's father." Clyde felt a lump form in his throat. "And," he prompted, bracing himself for whatever news awaited him. The second officer spoke up, glancing at his partner before continuing. "There's nothing to charge you with. We've determined that your relationship with Sarah was innocent and that there was no wrongdoing on your part." Relief washed over Clyde, but it was short-lived. The first officer continued, "However, you do have the option to press charges against her father for assault. That is a serious offense, and it could lead to jail time." Clyde's heart sank again, this time with an unexpected heaviness. "No," he replied immediately, shaking his head. "I wouldn't do that." The officers exchanged surprised glances. "Mr. Clyde, you have every right to seek justice for what he did to you. Assault is a serious matter," the second officer urged, trying to appeal to his sense of self-preservation. "I know," Clyde said, his voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling inside him. "But I would never do anything to hurt Sarah or her family. That's not who I am." The officers were taken aback by his unwavering conviction. "You're putting yourself at risk, sir. He's shown he's capable of violence. What if he comes after you again?" the first officer pressed, his tone laced with concern. Clyde leaned back against the pillow, his heart aching not just for himself, but for the entire situation. "I understand that, but pressing charges won't fix what happened. It won't help Sarah. It won't bring back my daughter. I don't want to escalate this any further." The officers paused, clearly contemplating his words. "If that's your decision, we respect it," the second officer said finally, though the concern lingered in their eyes. "But if you change your mind, don't hesitate to reach out." As they left the room, Clyde felt a mixture of relief and heaviness. He knew he had made the right choice, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He couldn't help but wonder how Sarah's father would react if he learned that Clyde had chosen forgiveness over retaliation. Later that evening, after the sun had fully set, Sarah's father arrived at the hospital, his expression conflicted. He stood in the doorway, visibly tense, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken words. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clyde nodded, gesturing to the empty chair beside his bed. "Of course." Sarah's father hesitated before taking a seat, the gravity of the moment hanging heavy in the air. I came to apologize," he stammered, his gaze dropping to the floor. Clyde studied him, sensing the turmoil beneath the surface. "It's okay," he said softly. "You were scared for your daughter. I understand that." "No, it's not okay," Sarah's father shot back, his voice rising slightly, a mix of anger and regret swirling within him. "I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. I should have talked to you instead of jumping to conclusions." Clyde held his gaze, seeing the pain and regret etched across the man's features. "I appreciate that. It's hard to see things clearly when emotions run high. I want you to know that I would never hurt Sarah. She means everything to me." Sarah's father admitted, his voice cracking. "I just lost control. I don't want to lose her too." Clyde felt a wave of compassion wash over him. "I get that. It's tough to navigate these feelings, especially when you've experienced loss. But you have to trust her. Trust that she can make her own friends." "Will you forgive me?" Sarah's father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect anything from you after what I did, but I hope we can find a way to move past this for Sarah's sake." Clyde took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on him. "Forgiveness isn't easy, but I believe it's necessary. For Sarah, for you, and for me. We all have wounds that we carry, but we have to find a way to heal together." The two men sat in silence, both understanding the long road ahead. Clyde knew that forgiveness wouldn't erase the pain of the past, but it could pave the way for a future where Sarah felt safe and loved by both of them. As the night deepened, a sense of resolve settled in Clyde's heart. He wouldn't allow anger to control him. Instead, he would choose to be a guiding light for Sarah, just as he had intended from the beginning. The days following the incident in the hospital passed in a blur for Clyde. The bruises on his face faded slowly, but the emotional scars from the confrontation lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling of being on shaky ground, as if everything he had built with Sarah was now a fragile structure that could collapse at any moment. Meanwhile, Sarah remained a constant presence in his thoughts. He worried about her, knowing that the fallout from the incident would weigh heavily on her young heart. He remembered their shared laughter, the joy that lit her face when she played the piano. He longed to return to those moments, to help her heal from the turmoil that had engulfed them both. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Clyde found himself sitting on the small porch of his house, watching the world go by. He spotted a few children playing in the street, their laughter echoing through the air. It was a stark contrast to the heaviness that had settled in his own life. Just as he was about to retreat into his thoughts, he saw a familiar figure approaching. Sarah walked down the sidewalk, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression a mixture of determination and nervousness. She hesitated at the edge of his yard, glancing at the porch before taking a deep breath and walking up the steps. "Hi, Mr. Clyde," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Hey, Sarah," he replied, smiling warmly despite the shadows that still loomed in his heart. "It's good to see you." She took a seat on the edge of the porch, keeping her distance as if unsure of how to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "I was hoping to come by and play the piano," she admitted, looking down at her hands. Clyde's heart swelled at her request. "Of course, I'd love that. Clara's piano is always waiting for you." He gestured for her to follow him inside, where the familiar sight of the old piano awaited them in the living room. As they entered the room, Sarah's eyes lit up at the sight of the polished instrument. She approached it slowly, running her fingers across the keys as if greeting an old friend. "Can I play something?" she asked, glancing back at Clyde. "Please do," he encouraged, taking a seat on the couch nearby. Sarah settled onto the piano bench, her small hands resting over the keys. As she began to play, the notes floated through the air, each sound a balm for the wounds that had opened between them. Clyde closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him, and for a moment he forgot everything: the pain, the confrontation, the lingering sense of unease. When she finished, she turned to Clyde, a shy smile breaking through her previous apprehension. "Did you like it?" "I loved it," he replied, beaming at her. "You have a real gift, Sarah. Clara would have been so proud to hear you play." The mention of Clara brought a hint of sadness back into the room. Sarah's expression softened. "I'm sorry for what happened. My dad was really upset, and I didn't know he would react like that." Clyde nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "It's okay. It was a scary situation for everyone involved, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Sarah hesitated, her brow furrowing. I don't want you to think I'm scared of you now. I didn't mean to get you hurt." "Sarah, you didn't do anything wrong," Clyde reassured her gently. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, and we can't always control what happens. What matters is that we learn and grow from them." She bit her lip, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I miss Clara. I wish I could have known her." Clyde felt a lump in his throat at her words. "Me too, kiddo. She was a bright light in this world. But you know what? You can carry her memory with you every time you play that piano. You can create music that honors her." A spark of determination ignited in Sarah's eyes. "Can we play together? Like you and Clara used to?" Clyde smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Absolutely. Let's make some beautiful music together." For the next hour, they took turns playing, with Clyde guiding Sarah through melodies and harmonies, teaching her the basics of music theory, and sharing stories about Clara. As they laughed and played, the air between them shifted, gradually dissolving the tension that had hung like a shadow over their relationship. After their impromptu lesson, Sarah stood up and looked around, her curiosity piqued. "Can I see Clara's old things?" she asked cautiously, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Of course," Clyde replied, leading her to a room filled with Clara's belongings, stuffed animals, toys, books, and the like. It was a treasure trove of memories, a glimpse into the life of a girl who had brought so much joy into Clyde's life. Sarah's eyes sparkled as she explored the room, her fingers brushing over the items that once belonged to Clara. "Wow, she had so many toys," she exclaimed, picking up a stuffed rabbit. "Did she love this one?" "Very much," Clyde chuckled, his heart swelling with fond memories. "She named it Mr. Whiskers, and it went everywhere with her." As Sarah held the rabbit, she felt a sense of connection. "Can I take it home?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "I promise to take care of it." "Absolutely. I think Clara would love to know it's in good hands," Clyde said, smiling. As Sarah left that day with Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, she felt a renewed sense of hope. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Clyde by her side, she felt stronger. They were two souls navigating the aftermath of loss, each needing the other in ways they hadn't fully realized. Later that night, as Clyde prepared for bed, he found himself smiling at the memory of Sarah's laughter and the bond they had begun to rebuild. He felt a sense of purpose wash over him, one that extended beyond just teaching Sarah music. He wanted to protect her, to be a guiding presence in her life. As he lay in bed, he thought of Clara and how proud she would be of the friendship that was blossoming between him and Sarah. He knew that love could transform even the deepest wounds into something beautiful. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Years passed, and the world around Sarah transformed into a beautiful tapestry of memories and milestones. The scars of her childhood, her parents' divorce, the darkness that clouded her early experiences, faded into distant echoes as she navigated her way into adulthood. With Clyde by her side as a mentor and friend, she blossomed into a confident young woman, passionate about music and art. On this sunny afternoon, a wave of excitement and anticipation filled the air as Sarah stood in a stunning white gown, her heart racing with joy. Today was the day she had dreamed of, her wedding day. She couldn't help but remember the little girl who had once walked to school alone, how she had found solace in a friendship that transcended age and circumstance. As she prepared to walk down the aisle, her heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had guided her along the way. Clyde stood proudly at her side, a father figure who had filled the void left by her own. He had nurtured her love for music, taught her the importance of kindness and forgiveness, and had always been there to support her dreams. At the other end of the aisle stood Sarah's father, a man transformed by time and reflection. After the incident with Clyde, he had sought to rebuild his relationship with Sarah. Through heartfelt conversations and apologies, they had worked toward healing, finding a way to move forward together. As he looked at his daughter, radiant and full of love, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. The music swelled, and Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. As she began her walk down the aisle, her gaze fell on her groom, Clyde's nephew, a kind-hearted young man named Ethan, whom Clyde had introduced her to during her teenage years. They had grown close over the years, their bond forged through shared laughter, dreams, and a love for music. Today, he awaited her with a smile that made her heart flutter. The guests, a gathering of family and friends, looked on with admiration as Sarah approached. The air was thick with emotion, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. But as she reached the altar, she locked eyes with Clyde, who beamed at her with pride and love. "Are you ready?" he whispered, his voice warm and reassuring. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with happiness. More than ever. The ceremony unfolded like a beautiful symphony, filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt vows. Sarah and Ethan exchanged promises of love and devotion, their words echoing with sincerity as they vowed to stand by each other through life's journey. Clyde stood beside them, a proud guardian of love, as he watched the two young souls pledge their futures to one another. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause erupted from the crowd, a joyful celebration of love that enveloped them all. Sarah and Ethan turned to face their guests, their faces lit with joy, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Later, at the reception, laughter and music filled the air. Friends and family danced together, celebrating the union of two souls who had found each other amidst life's challenges. Clyde watched from the sidelines, a smile on his face as he saw Sarah twirl around the dance floor, her laughter ringing like music in his heart. But instead of the traditional father-daughter dance, Clyde had a different idea, one that would honor both Sarah's journey and the cherished memories he held of Clara. He approached the grand piano set up for the reception, beckoning Sarah to join him. "Shall we play a song?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Sarah's face lit up with excitement. "Really? Just like we used to?" "Just like we used to," he promised, and as she sat beside him at the piano, the crowd quieted, their curiosity piqued. As they began to play, the notes floated into the air, weaving a beautiful melody that resonated with every heart in the room. Clyde and Sarah poured their souls into the music, their fingers dancing across the keys in perfect harmony. The audience watched, captivated, as the two created a moment that was both hauntingly beautiful and filled with joy. Tears welled in the eyes of those watching, their hearts swelling with emotion as the music carried them away. It was a song of love, of loss, and of the deep connection that transcended time. In that moment, it felt as though Clara herself was present, smiling down on them, proud of the bond they shared. As they finished, the room erupted into applause, but all Clyde could see was Sarah's radiant smile. She turned to him, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "That was incredible. Just like old times, right?" he chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. As the festivities continued, Clyde felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. He had witnessed Sarah grow into an incredible woman, one who carried Clara's spirit within her. Their bond had helped heal the wounds of the past, reminding him of the love that could bloom from pain. Later that night, as the last of the guests departed, Clyde stepped outside to catch his breath. The moon shone brightly overhead, casting a gentle glow on the world around him. He took a moment to reflect, filled with gratitude for the love he had witnessed that day. As he made his way to his car, he felt a sense of contentment wash over him. Clyde opened the glove box and retrieved a small photograph, a cherished picture of Clara, taken years ago. He traced her face with his fingers, memories flooding back, each moment a reminder of the love they had shared. With a tender smile, he pressed the photograph to his lips, whispering softly, "I love you, baby." The words were a promise, a reflection of the enduring love that had shaped his life. Clyde took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift as he looked ahead toward the future. He closed the glove box, smiled once more at Clara's picture, and got into the car, ready to drive on. The road stretched before him, a journey filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. And as he drove into the night, Clyde knew that Clara would always be with him, living on in the memories they had created and the love that continued to flourish in Sarah's heart. Sarah stood on the balcony of their oceanfront hotel room, the warm Hawaiian sun kissing her skin as the gentle waves lapped at the shore below. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they both took in the breathtaking view. The vibrant colors of the sunset reflected on the water, a painting of oranges and pinks that seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings. "I can't believe we're finally here," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe. "This place is even more beautiful than I imagined." Ethan chuckled softly. "I knew you'd love it. Just wait until we go snorkeling tomorrow. The coral reefs are like a whole other world." As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah's mind drifted back to Clara. She could almost hear her laughter dancing on the wind, a melody of joy that had once filled her heart. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming urge to honor Clara's memory during their honeymoon. The thought sparked a creative flame within her. Maybe she could write a song, something that captured the love and beauty Clara had brought into her life. "Ethan," she said suddenly, turning to face him, "I want to write a song while we're here, something for Clara." His expression shifted to one of understanding and support. "That's a beautiful idea, Sarah. I know how much she meant to you. You should definitely do it." The next few days were a whirlwind of adventure, from exploring lush rainforests to lounging on golden beaches. But in the quiet moments, Sarah found herself scribbling lyrics in a small notebook she had brought along. The words flowed effortlessly, inspired by the beauty surrounding her and the love she had for Clara. Each line was a tribute, a way to keep Clara's spirit alive in her heart and share her story with the world. On the fourth day of their honeymoon, they discovered that a local radio station was hosting a song contest, inviting visitors to showcase their musical talents. The winner would have their song aired on the radio and receive a small cash prize. Sarah's heart raced at the thought of performing her tribute to Clara in front of an audience. "I have to enter," she said, her eyes shining with determination. Ethan smiled, his pride evident. "You should. I know you'll do great." That evening, they arrived at the radio station, the sound of laughter and music filling the air. Contestants warmed up, their voices blending in a harmonious cacophony. As Sarah waited her turn, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She thought of Clara and how much she would have loved this moment. When it was finally her turn to perform, Sarah stepped onto the stage, the microphone standing tall before her like a beacon. The crowd quieted, all eyes on her. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel Clara's presence beside her. With the first notes of the piano guiding her, Sarah began to sing. The lyrics poured from her heart, telling the story of Clara's life, the joy she brought, and the pain of her absence. The audience was captivated, hanging on to every word as Sarah's voice soared, a beautiful blend of strength and vulnerability. She poured her soul into the performance, every note resonating with the love she held for Clara. As she reached the final chorus, tears glistened in the eyes of those listening, moved by the raw emotion of the song. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, and Sarah felt a rush of exhilaration. She had shared Clara's story, and in doing so, she had kept her memory alive. Later that night, after celebrating with Ethan and other contestants, the radio station announced the winner. As they called her name, Sarah could hardly believe it. She had won. The crowd cheered, and tears of joy streamed down her face as she accepted the small trophy and the prize money. She felt a wave of warmth wash over her, knowing that Clara was there with her in spirit, celebrating this moment together. Meanwhile, back home, Clyde sat in a hospital waiting room, anxiety gnawing at him. He had come for a routine checkup, but his thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by worries about Sarah and how she was adjusting to married life. Suddenly, the familiar sound of the radio filled the waiting room. The announcer's voice broke through the chatter, announcing the winner of the song contest in Hawaii. "We have a very special treat for you today. Here's the winning song from our local contest, performed by Sarah Anderson." Clyde's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the name. He leaned forward in his seat, his breath catching in his throat as the first notes began to play. The voice that filled the room was unmistakably Sarah's, rich and powerful, weaving through the melody like a thread of gold. As the lyrics began to unfold, Clyde felt his heart swell with pride. He listened intently, and as he absorbed the meaning behind the song, he could hardly contain himself. He knew this song was about Clara. The way Sarah spoke of love, loss, and hope resonated deeply, and it was as if Clara's spirit was singing along with her. With each passing moment, Clyde's excitement grew until he could no longer hold back. He jumped out of his seat, shouting, "That's my girl!" in the middle of the busy waiting room. Heads turned, and people looked at him as if he were crazy, but Clyde didn't care. He wore the biggest smile on his face, overflowing with pride and joy. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he listened to Sarah's voice fill the air, the power of her song transcending the hospital walls and wrapping around him like a warm embrace. He felt a renewed sense of purpose in that moment, knowing that Sarah had not only honored Clara's memory, but had also found her own voice through the experience. When the song came to an end, the waiting room erupted in applause, and Clyde stood there, basking in the afterglow of the moment. He could see the admiration in the eyes of those around him, people who had witnessed his joy. It didn't matter what anyone thought. He was proud of his girl, and he would always be her biggest supporter. As the announcer wrapped up the segment, Clyde returned to his seat, his heart still racing. He knew he would call Sarah as soon as he got the chance. He couldn't wait to tell her how proud he was of her, how she had filled that waiting room with love and light. In that moment, he felt a renewed sense of connection to Clara and to Sarah, two incredible women who had shaped his life in ways he would always cherish. He realized that even in her absence, Clara's spirit continued to inspire and uplift, reminding him that love transcended all boundaries. As he wiped his tears and collected himself, Clyde knew that life was full of unexpected twists and turns, but with love and music as their guiding lights, they would navigate the journey together. The moment Sarah stepped through the door of Clyde's house, a rush of warmth enveloped her. She had just returned from her enchanting Hawaiian honeymoon with Ethan, and the excitement of sharing her experiences with Clyde bubbled within her. She had spent countless hours dreaming about this moment, picturing Clyde's smile and the way his eyes would light up at her stories. As she approached the familiar front porch, her heart raced. She knocked lightly, and almost instantly the door swung open, revealing Clyde, his face breaking into a wide grin that mirrored her own. They both stepped forward and embraced tightly, a rush of happiness and love flooding over them. "Oh, Sarah, I've missed you so much," Clyde exclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. "I missed you too, Clyde," she replied, pulling back to look into his eyes. They both laughed, the joy of their reunion palpable. The embrace had been more than just a hug. It was a meeting of two souls who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. As they settled onto the couch, Sarah began recounting her honeymoon adventures, the sun-drenched beaches, the vibrant culture, and most importantly, the song contest that had allowed her to honor Clara in such a beautiful way. Clyde listened intently, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You won. That's amazing, sweetheart. I always knew you had it in you," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "And I couldn't have done it without you, Clyde. Your encouragement has meant the world to me," she said, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Oh, and guess what? A record company reached out to me, and they want me to make music for them. I can't believe it." Clyde's eyes widened in excitement, and a broad smile spread across his face. "That's incredible, Sarah. You deserve this. You've worked so hard, and I'm so proud of you." But as Sarah spoke, she noticed a shadow flicker across Clyde's face, a fleeting moment that didn't quite match the excitement in his voice. "What's wrong, Clyde?" she asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "Oh, it's nothing you need to worry about, sweetie," he replied, trying to brush it off, but Sarah's intuition told her otherwise. "Clyde, please. You know I can tell when something's bothering you. Just tell me," she insisted, her tone shifting from excitement to concern. Clyde hesitated, the smile slowly fading as he looked away. "Honey, I have cancer." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Sarah felt as though the ground beneath her feet had crumbled. Her heart sank, a sharp pain piercing through her chest as she struggled to comprehend the gravity of his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clyde sighed deeply, his expression turning solemn. "I went to the doctor for a routine checkup, and they found some troubling results. It's in the early stages, but I'll have to start treatment soon." No. Sarah shook her head in disbelief, tears welling in her eyes. "Clyde, you can't be serious. You've always been so strong. How could this happen?" Clyde reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I know it's a lot to take in. I'm trying to stay positive, and I want you to be too. I've fought through a lot in my life, and I plan to fight this as well. But Clyde, you're like family to me. I can't bear the thought of losing you," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. Clyde squeezed her hand, his eyes softening. "You're not going to lose me, Sarah. We're going to get through this together. I need you to promise me you'll stay strong for both of us." Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. "I promise, but I'm scared. What if things don't go the way we hope?" "Every day is a new battle," he replied, his voice steady. "But I've got you by my side, and that makes me stronger. We'll tackle this one step at a time." In that moment, Sarah realized just how much Clyde had meant to her, not only as a mentor and friend, but as a guiding light during some of the darkest moments of her life. He had filled the void left by Clara's absence, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. "Clyde, I'm here for you, no matter what. We'll get through this together," she said, determination filling her voice. "Thank you, sweetie," he smiled, though the pain in his eyes was evident. "You have no idea how much that means to me." As they sat together in the living room, the world outside continued its chaotic rhythm, but inside they created a sanctuary of love and support. They spoke about plans for the future, how they would navigate the challenges ahead, and how Sarah would continue to pursue her music. Days turned into weeks as Sarah made it a point to visit Clyde regularly, bringing him homemade meals and staying to chat. They shared laughter and tears, reminiscing about Clara and discussing dreams that seemed just out of reach. With every visit, Sarah made sure to bring a little piece of her newfound happiness into Clyde's life, filling their conversations with joy and hope. Despite the cloud hanging over them, Clyde's spirit remained unyielded. They both understood the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but their bond grew stronger through adversity. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, the sun casting a warm glow around them, Clyde looked at Sarah with a hint of mischief in his eyes. "I want you to do something for me, Sarah." "Anything, Clyde," she replied eagerly. "Promise me that you'll continue to write and make music, no matter what. Don't let anything hold you back." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "I promise, Clyde, I'll make you proud." "Good, because I plan to be front row at your concerts, cheering you on," he said, his smile returning, if only for a moment. "Deal!" she laughed, the sound echoing in the golden afternoon light. As the days turned into months, Sarah found strength in Clyde's unwavering positivity. They faced each challenge head-on, embracing the uncertainty together. Sarah wrote songs inspired by their journey, each lyric a testament to the bond they had formed, and each melody a promise that no matter what, they would always have each other. A year had passed since Sarah first learned of Clyde's cancer diagnosis. In that time, her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. Her music had touched the hearts of millions, propelling her into the spotlight as a national superstar. Yet beneath the glittering surface of fame, a heavy cloud loomed over her heart. As the sun rose on another bright day, Sarah sat at the grand piano in her spacious home, the instrument gleaming under the soft light filtering through the windows. She played a few notes, but the melody felt hollow. It was the same piano she had learned to play on Clyde's porch, yet today it felt like a stranger. Her fingers danced over the keys, but her mind was miles away, consumed by thoughts of her dear friend. The past year had seen Clyde grow weaker, his vibrant spirit dimmed by the relentless grip of cancer. The once robust man who had taught her the joy of music was now frail, often needing assistance to rise from his chair. Despite this, Clyde remained a beacon of strength, his unwavering resolve inspiring Sarah to keep pushing forward. But as her star continued to rise, she felt the chasm between their worlds widening. "Hey, Clyde," she said softly, glancing over at the chair he occupied, his body wrapped in a cozy blanket. The sight of him made her heart ache. "Sarah, sweetheart, you look like a star today," he replied, a faint smile creeping onto his face, though the shadows under his eyes betrayed the exhaustion he carried. "Thanks, Clyde. I have a meeting with the label today," she said, forcing a smile in return. "They want to discuss my next album." "That's wonderful. You should go out there and show them what you've got," he encouraged, his voice filled with the same enthusiasm she had grown to love. "But it just feels different now. I don't know how to explain it," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm supposed to be excited, but every time I think about it, I just wish you were there with me. I can't celebrate without you." Clyde reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've worked hard for this, Sarah. You deserve every ounce of success that comes your way. Just remember, it's okay to feel joy and sorrow at the same time." "But what's the point of all this success if you're not there to share it with me?" she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I feel like I'm living in a dream, but it's a nightmare because you're not well." Clyde's expression softened, a mixture of sadness and understanding washing over him. "You're not alone in this, sweetie. You've got a whole world of people who love you, who support you. You've inspired them. But I understand that it's hard. You and we've shared so much together, and that bond is special." The weight of his words settled heavily on her heart. She wanted to believe him, but the noise of her success, the flashing lights, the screaming fans, the accolades felt insignificant compared to the quiet comfort of Clyde's companionship. His presence had always been a balm for her soul, and now it was as if she were drifting further away from him. As the weeks passed, Sarah threw herself into her music, using the pain of her reality as fuel for her creativity. Each song she penned spoke of love, loss, and the fragility of life, a tribute to the bond she shared with Clyde. They were heartfelt ballads that resonated deeply with her fans, yet each note felt like a bittersweet reminder of what was slipping through her fingers. Every concert was an emotional roller coaster. On stage, Sarah poured her heart out, the lyrics flowing effortlessly as she connected with her audience. The applause was thunderous, the love palpable. Yet when she stepped off the stage, the reality of her situation hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. In the quiet moments after the crowds had dispersed, Sarah found herself alone in her hotel room, staring at the vibrant awards that adorned the walls. They were beautiful reminders of her talent, but they also felt like shackles, binding her to a success that brought her little joy without Clyde beside her to share it. One night, after a particularly triumphant concert, she returned to her hotel room with tears streaming down her face. She flopped onto the bed, the weight of her emotions crashing down like a tidal wave. How could she celebrate her achievements when her best friend was suffering? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she grabbed it, her heart racing. It was a text from Clyde. "Just heard your song on the radio. You're amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Tears pooled in her eyes as she read his words. How could he still find the strength to support her when he himself was fighting such a daunting battle? It felt so unfair. "I miss you," she typed back, her fingers trembling. "I wish you were here." Moments later, her phone rang. Clyde's name lit up the screen, and she answered immediately, her voice shaking. "Clyde? Hey, kiddo, I just wanted to hear your voice. How was the show?" he asked, his tone light despite the underlying fatigue. "It was good, but it felt empty without you there. I don't know how to keep doing this," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Sarah, you're not just a singer, you're a storyteller. Your songs have the power to change lives, and you have a gift that the world needs. Keep shining, even when it's hard. I'll always be cheering you on from the sidelines," he reassured her, his voice a soothing balm. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I want to celebrate our victories together," she pleaded. The weight of his words settled heavily on her heart. She wanted to believe him, but the noise of her success, the flashing lights, the screaming fans, the accolades felt insignificant compared to the quiet comfort of Clyde's companionship. His presence had always been a balm for her soul, and now it was as if she were drifting further away from him. As the weeks passed, Sarah threw herself into her music, using the pain of her reality as fuel for her creativity. Each song she penned spoke of love, loss, and the fragility of life, a tribute to the bond she shared with Clyde. They were heartfelt ballads that resonated deeply with her fans, yet each note felt like a bittersweet reminder of what was slipping through her fingers. Every concert was an emotional roller coaster. On stage, Sarah poured her heart out, the lyrics flowing effortlessly as she connected with her audience. The applause was thunderous, the love palpable. Yet when she stepped off the stage, the reality of her situation hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. In the quiet moments after the crowds had dispersed, Sarah found herself alone in her hotel room, staring at the vibrant awards that adorned the walls. They were beautiful reminders of her talent, but they also felt like shackles, binding her to a success that brought her little joy without Clyde beside her to share it. One night, after a particularly triumphant concert, she returned to her hotel room with tears streaming down her face. She flopped onto the bed, the weight of her emotions crashing down like a tidal wave. How could she celebrate her achievements when her best friend was suffering? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she grabbed it, her heart racing. It was a text from Clyde. "Just heard your song on the radio. You're amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Tears pooled in her eyes as she read his words. How could he still find the strength to support her when he himself was fighting such a daunting battle? It felt so unfair. "I miss you," she typed back, her fingers trembling. "I wish you were here." Moments later, her phone rang. Clyde's name lit up the screen, and she answered immediately, her voice shaking. "Clyde? Hey, kiddo, I just wanted to hear your voice. How was the show?" he asked, his tone light despite the underlying fatigue. "It was good, but it felt empty without you there. I don't know how to keep doing this," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Sarah, you're not just a singer, you're a storyteller. Your songs have the power to change lives, and you have a gift that the world needs. Keep shining, even when it's hard. I'll always be cheering you on from the sidelines," he reassured her, his voice a soothing balm. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I want to celebrate our victories together," she pleaded. "No!" she cried. her voice breaking as she rushed forward, desperate to get closer. But the paramedics moved quickly, their expressions somber, as they loaded the stretcher into the back of the ambulance. They worked with a sense of urgency, but their movements felt painfully slow to Sarah, each second stretching into an eternity. She fought to push through the chaos in her mind, but the weight of reality crashed down around her. "Clyde!" she screamed again, her heart pounding in her chest. "Clyde, no, please!" But the world around her continued to spin, the sirens blaring, the voices of strangers fading into the background. She was barely aware of the tears streaming down her cheeks as she fell to her knees, the hard ground biting into her skin. The scene around her faded, and the last memory of Clyde flooded her mind, his smile, his gentle encouragement. "I'm proud of you, and I always will be. You're my girl." Those words echoed in her ears, a haunting melody that played on repeat, intertwining with the sounds of the ambulance. How could he leave her? How dare the world keep turning while he wasn't on it anymore? The irrational thoughts swirled in her mind like a tempest, each one more painful than the last. Anger surged within her. Anger at the universe, at fate, at the unfairness of it all. "Why?" she screamed, her voice raw as she pounded her fists against the pavement. "Why did you have to go? I needed you. I still need you." The EMTs paused, glancing back at her with sympathetic eyes, but their expressions only deepened her sense of isolation. No one could understand the depth of her pain, the gaping hole that Clyde's absence left in her heart. Despair clawed at her insides, a darkness threatening to engulf her whole. How could she face the world without him? He had been her anchor, her mentor, and her friend. Every song she had sung, every note she had played, had been infused with his spirit. Now they felt empty and hollow, void of the warmth that Clyde had brought into her life. As the ambulance doors closed with a definitive thud, Sarah's heart shattered. The finality of it all washed over her like a cold wave, dragging her deeper into an abyss of grief. She dropped her head into her hands, her body shaking as the sobs erupted from her chest. "Please, Clyde, don't leave me." The world around her blurred into a haze of grief and loss. She felt as if she were screaming into a void, her cries swallowed by the silence that surrounded her. How could she carry on without him? The thought of a future without Clyde seemed unbearable, like trying to breathe underwater. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time felt meaningless in that moment. Eventually, she managed to pull herself to her feet, her legs trembling beneath her. With shaky breaths, she wiped her tears and made her way to the front door of Clyde's house, her heart heavy with sorrow. As she stepped inside, she was enveloped by memories. The scent of his favorite cologne lingered in the air, and the walls echoed with laughter, the kind that only existed between friends who understood each other completely. In the corner, she spotted the radio, still playing softly. It was tuned to the station that had aired her performance the night before. Her heart twisted painfully at the thought. While she had been up on stage, pouring her heart out in tribute to him, Clyde had been slipping away. She turned the dial slowly, the static crackling in response, until she found a familiar melody. It was one of the songs they had played together, a haunting tune that encapsulated their bond. As the notes filled the room, she felt as though Clyde were right there beside her, encouraging her to keep going, even in the face of unimaginable pain. In that moment, she realized that even though Clyde was gone, his spirit would forever live on in her heart and in her music. She would carry his memory with her always, a guiding light in the darkness. And as she sat there in the silence, surrounded by echoes of the past, Sarah made a silent promise to honor Clyde's memory by continuing to share their story through her songs. She would never forget the lessons he had taught her, nor the bond they had forged. Years had passed, and life had come full circle. Sarah, now a mother, watched her little girl, Clara, run around the living room. The sun filtered through the large bay windows, casting a golden glow over their cozy home. A warmth filled the room, not just from the sunlight, but from the laughter and love that radiated from their family. Her husband sat on the couch, reading a book, while Clara played with her toys, her beautiful curls bouncing as she moved with the boundless energy of childhood. It was a peaceful life, one that Sarah had dreamed of but never thought possible. And while the past still held a bittersweet place in her heart, The future had turned into something more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. As she sat by the familiar piano, the same one Clyde had taught her on all those years ago, Sarah felt a surge of nostalgia. She ran her fingers gently along the keys, the wood worn smooth by countless hours of playing. The memories of Clyde were etched into every inch of that piano, each key holding a piece of their time together. "Clara, come here for a moment," Sarah called softly, her voice filled with both tenderness and anticipation. "Okay, Mom," came the cheerful reply. Clara, now about 9 years old, skipped over to her mother. Her bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as she spotted Sarah sitting next to the piano, her small figure bouncing with excitement. It was a scene Sarah had lived before, except this time she was the one passing on the legacy. "What is it, Mom?" Clara asked, her smile as radiant as her spirit. Sarah patted the bench next to her. "Come sit with me, sweetheart. I think it's about time I teach you something." Clara's eyebrows furrowed in confusion but inched closer, climbing up onto the bench beside her mother. "Teach me what?" she asked with that innocent curiosity only a child could have. Sarah smiled playfully, pretending to ponder. "The drums," she teased with a grin, watching Clara giggle in response. "No, I'm just kidding," she continued as her fingers hovered over the keys. "The piano. I was about your age when I started learning." Clara's eyes widened. "You were?" Sarah nodded. "Yep, I had a very special teacher who taught me on this very piano." She gently took Clara's small hand in her own and placed it on the keys, just as Clyde had done for her so many years ago. Clara beamed. "Can you teach me now?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Sarah replied softly. She guided her daughter's fingers over the keys, the simple melody of a beginner's lesson filling the room. As Clara's tiny hands pressed the keys, Sarah found herself transported back to her own childhood, when she sat beside Clyde at this same piano. Sarah smiled playfully, pretending to ponder. "The drums," she teased with a grin, watching Clara giggle in response. "No, I'm just kidding," she continued as her fingers hovered over the keys. "The piano. I was about your age when I started learning." Clara's eyes widened. "You were?" Sarah nodded. "Yep. I had a very special teacher who taught me on this very piano." She gently took Clara's small hand in her own and placed it on the keys, just as Clyde had done for her so many years ago. Clara beamed. "Can you teach me now?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Sarah replied softly. She guided her daughter's fingers over the keys, the simple melody of a beginner's lesson filling the room. As Clara's tiny hands pressed the keys, Sarah found herself transported back to her own childhood, when she sat beside Clyde at this same piano. Each note resonated with memories. The late-night lessons, Clyde's patient voice, the joy they had shared, it all came rushing back. Her throat tightened, and her eyes began to water, but it wasn't sadness she felt. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the man who had given her so much, who had shaped the very path that led her to where she was now. Clara stopped playing for a moment and looked up at her mother with concern. "Why are you sad, Mom?" she asked, her innocent voice filled with worry. Sarah quickly blinked back the tears and smiled down at her daughter, her heart swelling with love. "I'm not sad, honey," she said, her voice soft and full of affection. "Sometimes when you remember really good things from your life, it makes you feel full inside. I'm just happy, that's all." Clara nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the deep meaning in her mother's words. "Okay, Mom," she said quietly, her focus turning back to the piano. "Can we keep playing?" "Of course," Sarah replied, her smile widening. She took a deep breath and continued the lesson, her fingers guiding Clara's as they played together. But even as she focused on her daughter, her thoughts drifted back to Clyde. She thought of all the times he had lifted her up when no one else could, of the love he had shared so generously. Without him, she wouldn't be here, in this moment, with a beautiful family of her own. Clyde had given her more than music. He had given her the strength to believe in herself, to chase her dreams, and to love deeply. The piano keys felt different now, as if they were filled with both the weight of the past and the promise of the future. And though Clyde wasn't physically there, Sarah could feel his presence. She knew he was watching over her, proud as ever. As the music played on, Sarah leaned in close to her daughter, brushing a soft kiss on the top of her head. Then, under her breath so quietly that only she could hear, she whispered, Thank you, Clyde. The music was more than notes on a page. It was a connection to the past, to the people who had shaped her, and to the legacy she would leave behind. And as Sarah and Clara continued to play, their laughter mixing with the melody, the room was filled with love, a love that had been passed from one generation to the next. Sarah's heart was full, and for the first time in a long while, she felt whole. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put a lot of love and care into telling these important stories, and your support truly means the world to me. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Have a blessed day.